Oil of all types have gone on a tear, including crude palm oil or CPO, which has set a new record high since 2008 after Russian President Vladimir Putin launched an invasion of Ukraine. March 2022 CPO futures were up 587 ringgit at 7,093 ringgit a ton. Crude oil prices topped $100 a barrel for the first time since 2014. Meanwhile, cryptocurrencies extended declines, Bloomberg reported, with Bitcoin down by as much as 8.5% to $34,337 at time of reporting. The traditional safe haven gold, meanwhile, surged to the highest level since early 2021 to over $1,950 an ounce. Russian forces invaded Ukraine by land, air and sea today, Reuters reported, confirming, as the newswire put it, the biggest attack by one state against another in Europe since World War II. EU Foreign Affairs Chief Joseph Borrell said these are among the darkest hours of Europe since the Second World War. The invasion has raised the prospects of toughened sanctions against Russia, and Reuters notes that any disruption to the energy and commodities markets poses an immediate threat to a global economy barely emerging from the pandemic. It quoted Chris Weston, head of research at broker Pepperstone, as saying, "There are no buyers here for risk, and there are a lot of sellers out there, so this market is getting hit very hard." The country's largest lender, Maybank, registered a 33.78% rise in its latest quarterly profit in the absence of huge loan impairments that were recorded in the previous corresponding period. Fourth quarter FY21 net profit jumped to 2.05 billion ringgit from 1.53 billion ringgit. Allowances for impairment losses on loans and advances were lower by 85.61% to 157.28 million ringgit from 1.09 billion ringgit. This more than offset the slight decline in net operating income before impairment of 3.34 billion ringgit from 3.44 billion ringgit. Revenue eased 8.06% to 11.26 billion ringgit from 12.24 billion ringgit. The lender declared a dividend of 30 cents per share, bringing its FY21 payout to 58 cents per share from 52 cents in FY20. Full-year net profit rose 24.92% to 8.09 billion ringgit from 6.48 billion ringgit previously, while 12-month top line fell 9.94% to 45.96 billion ringgit from 51.03 billion ringgit. Maybank Chairman Tan Sri Zamzam Zairani Muhammad Isa said an overall sustained economic recovery is expected this year. Still, it anticipates its return on equity will be similar to that of FY21 and has set a headline KPI of between 9.5% and 10%, taking into account the 2022 prosperity tax. Shares of Maybank slipped 0.8% to 8 ringgit 70 cents at the close, giving it a market capitalization of 103.34 billion ringgit. Petronas Chemicals Group, or Petchem, saw its net profit surge to a record high of 2.06 billion ringgit for the fourth quarter of FY21, over 4 times the 466 million ringgit it made a year ago, thanks mainly to improved product spreads from higher prices of urea, polymers and methanol. Revenue jumped 81.8% to 6.98 billion ringgit from 3.84 billion ringgit previously, largely due to higher product prices in tandem with the improved crude oil price and healthy demand. It declared a second interim dividend of 23 cents per share, bringing Petchem's total dividend for FY21 to 56 cents, almost 5 times the 12 cents it paid in FY20. Meanwhile, full-year net profit rose to a record high of 7.35 billion ringgit, over 4 times the 1.63 billion ringgit it recorded in FY20, driven by the surge in petrochemical prices throughout the year. Cumulative revenue rose 60.32% to 23.03 billion ringgit from 14.36 billion ringgit previously, supported by high plant utilization of 93%. Petchem MD cum CEO Muhammad Yusri Muhammad Yusof says the group is pleased with the exceptional results. Petchem's shares slipped 0.33% to 9 ringgit 20 cent at the close, giving the group a market capitalization of 73.60 billion ringgit. UEM Sunrise CEO Sufyan Abdullah says the property developer's turnaround will be driven by a combination of factors, including asset monetization, revenue stream refocus, and sizable new property sales, against a challenging operating environment marked by overhang real estate units amid the lingering economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. UEM Sunrise is looking to dispose of non-core assets this year of over 300 million ringgit, comprising a combination of land and legacy assets, which include car parks, small offices, apartments, and unsold bungalow land. The plan is to streamline its business to focus purely on property development revenue and higher value assets. The company, which targets to launch new property projects worth about 3.3 billion ringgit in 2022, is aiming for new property sales of 1.5 billion ringgit during the year. Sufyan says UEM Sunrise sees a slow property take-up rate in the beginning of the year, but the momentum should pick up again towards the end of the second half of 2022. At the close, the developer's share price fell 8.45% to 32.5 cent for a market value of about 1.64 billion ringgit. Tenaga Nasional or TNB says fourth quarter FY21 net profit tumbled 27.57% to 877.8 million ringgit from 1.21 billion ringgit a year ago, as it contended with higher tax expenses and unfavorable foreign exchange rates, while operating expenses jumped due to higher fuel prices. The earnings decline came despite revenue rising 52.41% to 15.74 billion ringgit from 10.32 billion ringgit on higher sales of electricity. This was mainly due to the under-recovery position of the imbalance cost pass-through amounting to 3.21 billion ringgit, as opposed to the over-recovery position of 1.56 billion ringgit previously. Operating expenses climbed 63% to 14.5 billion ringgit. For the full FY21, net profit rose a marginal 1.92% to 3.67 billion ringgit from 3.59 billion ringgit in FY20, while revenue climbed 19.68% to 52.63 billion ringgit from 43.98 billion ringgit on higher electricity sales. It declared a final dividend of 18 cent per share for FY21, raising its payout to 40 cent versus the 80 cent it paid out in FY20. Moving forward, the group foresees a reasonable performance for the year 2022 while remaining cautious about high fuel prices and challenging economic outlook. Shares in TNB finished 0.22% down at 9 ringgit today, giving it a market capitalization of 51.53 billion ringgit.